The morning streets of Chicago were busy with people rushing to work when Jake Carter stepped into a modest neighborhood bank branch. The building looked ordinary, tucked between a laundromat and a coffee shop, but to Jake, this visit mattered. He wore a plain brown jacket, slightly worn at the elbows, and carried a slim folder under his arm. There was nothing about him that suggested power or wealth, just another customer trying to get through the day. Jake approached the front desk and calmly explained that he wanted to discuss a short-term business loan for a small logistics startup. The young teller nodded politely and directed him to the branch manager's office. Inside, the manager, Richard Hale, barely looked up from his computer. Richard was known for his sharp suits, loud confidence, and quick judgments. He prided himself on reading people the moment they walked in. As Jake explained his request, Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning Jake from head to toe. The worn shoes, the simple watch, the absence of urgency or nervousness, all of it formed an image in Richard's mind. He didn't hear the careful details Jake shared about local jobs, long-term plans, or responsible growth. Instead, he interrupted with a smile that wasn't kind. "Look," Richard said, chuckling, "this bank has standards. I'll pay you double if you actually have a balance worth mentioning here." The laugh that followed was loud enough to be heard outside the office. A couple of employees glanced over, uncomfortable but silent. Jake paused for a moment, meeting Richard's eyes without anger or embarrassment. His expression remained calm, almost thoughtful. "I understand," Jake replied evenly. He slowly opened the folder and placed his identification and loan paperwork on the desk. "I'd still like this application reviewed properly." Richard waved a hand dismissively. "These things take time, and honestly, people like you should focus on saving before thinking about loans." Jake nodded, thanked him for his time, and stood up without argument. As he walked out, he noticed the subtle reactions around him. The teller's uneasy glance, a junior officer lowering her eyes, the quiet tension that floated in the air. Jake made a mental note of everything. Not out of pride, but concern. Outside the bank, Jake took a deep breath. He wasn't offended by the insult. What troubled him was how easily respect had been replaced with mockery. For years, he had worked his way up in the financial world, learning that leadership wasn't about numbers alone, it was about character. Today's visit was never really about the loan. Jake checked his phone and saw several missed calls from the corporate office. He ignored them for now and walked down the street, blending back into the world of ordinary people. Behind him, the bank returned to its routine, unaware that a quiet test had just begun, one that would soon change everything inside those. That same afternoon, the atmosphere inside the Chicago bank branch shifted without warning. What had begun as an ordinary workday suddenly felt tense as computers across the office chimed at once. A red notification appeared on every screen. Mandatory executive video conference, CEO speaking live. Conversations stopped. Phones were placed on hold. Employees straightened in their seats. Manager Richard Hale adjusted his tie with confidence. Executive meetings were rare, but he welcomed the idea. To him, they were opportunities to be seen, to impress, to remind higher-ups of his results. He glanced around the office, noticing the nervous energy among his team, and smirked slightly. Whatever this meeting was about, he felt certain it had nothing to do with him. The large monitor in the conference room flickered on. The company logo appeared briefly, then the video feed connected. Richard's smile froze. On the screen sat Jake. Not the customer from earlier, or rather, not just a customer. He was dressed in a tailored suit now, posture straight, expression calm but serious. The same eyes, the same voice. Silence fell so deep that even the humming air conditioner seemed loud. "Good afternoon," Jake began evenly. "I'm Jake Carter, CEO of Carter National Bank." Several employees exchanged stunned looks. Richard felt his mouth go dry. His mind raced back to the morning, the laugh, the words he had spoken so carelessly. Jake continued, his tone controlled. "Earlier today, I visited this branch without identification of my role. I wanted to experience our service exactly how our customers do. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. What I observed," Jake said, "was deeply concerning." Richard's hands clenched under the table. Jake spoke about respect, not as a policy, but as a responsibility. He talked about customers being judged by appearances instead of intentions. He addressed leadership, reminding everyone that titles meant nothing if dignity was forgotten. His words were firm, but not cruel. There was no shouting, no humiliation. That somehow made it worse. "I built this bank on trust," Jake said. "And trust begins the moment a person walks through our doors." He paused, then added, "Effective immediately, the branch manager position here will be under review. Temporary leadership will be assigned." Everyone understood what that meant. Jake shifted his gaze directly into the camera. "To those who treated customers with patience and professionalism today, I saw you. For those who did not, learn from this. Because the way we treat people when we think no one important is watching, that is who we truly are." The screen went dark. Silence lingered for several seconds before quiet movement resumed. Richard sat back slowly, the weight of realization pressing down on him. For the first time, his sharp suit felt heavy. Outside the building, Jake walked past the glass windows, unseen this time. He wasn't satisfied, but he was resolved. The lesson wasn't about punishment. It was about change. True authority, he knew, didn't announce itself. It revealed itself. When respect was the days following the executive meeting felt different inside the Chicago branch. The usual noise of keyboards and ringing phones was softer, almost cautious. Employees greeted customers with renewed politeness, standing straighter, listening longer. The temporary branch supervisor, Ms. Elena Morales, arrived early every morning and stayed late, carefully observing both staff behavior and customer experiences. Her presence alone signaled that change was no longer optional. Richard Hale was placed on administrative leave pending review. At home, sitting in a quiet apartment that suddenly felt unfamiliar, Richard replayed the moment again and again. The laugh, the careless words, the confidence that had blinded him. For the first time in years, there was no one to impress, no meeting to dominate. Just silence and regret. He had always believed results justified behavior, but now he understood how wrong that belief had been. Back at headquarters, Jake Carter met with the executive board. He made it clear that the incident wasn't about one man alone. "This is a mirror," he said. "If it happens in one branch, it can happen anywhere." New training programs were approved focusing on empathy, ethical leadership, and unbiased customer service. Mystery visits would become routine, not to punish, but to reveal truth. One afternoon, a handwritten letter arrived on Jake's desk. It was from Richard. Richard didn't make excuses. He acknowledged his arrogance and admitted that he had confused authority with superiority. He asked for one thing. Not forgiveness, but a chance to learn. Jake read the letter slowly, then placed it aside, thoughtful. A week later, Richard received a call, not reinstating him, but offering him a position far from management, customer relations training assistant, on probation. It was a step down in title and salary, but a step closer to understanding people. Richard accepted without hesitation. Months passed. The Chicago branch became one of the highest rated in customer satisfaction. Employees felt heard. Customers felt valued. Small business loans increased, not because standards were lowered, but because trust had grown. Jake quietly reviewed reports, rarely visiting in person again. The culture was changing, and that mattered more than recognition. One evening, as the branch prepared to close, a man in a simple jacket walked in, asking for guidance on starting a delivery business. A young employee welcomed him warmly and listened carefully. Richard, assisting nearby, watched the interaction with a different set of eyes. He felt something unfamiliar, but right. Later, Richard stepped outside, looking up at the city lights. He understood now that leadership wasn't about who sat at the top. It was about how people were treated at the bottom. Across the city, Jake stood in his office, gazing out at the skyline. He hadn't revealed himself that first day for power. He had done it for truth. Because respect, once lost, could destroy an institution. But when restored, it could rebuild everything.